All right, we're going to have a little classical conversation right now, and I have the esteemed author, producer, radio host, personality, as well as commentator, William Berger, who is on the phone with me. He's in New York right now. Hello, Will.
Hello, Brad. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. So glad to speak with you. You know, we've known each other for over a decade now. We did some work together at WNYC in New York, the radio station. And then you went to the Metropolitan Opera, and among your many duties there, you produced the opera quiz, which I've been fortunate to be associated with over the past decade.
And write it. I write it.
Yeah.
That's the fun part.
So, you know, you do so many things. You're sort of this factotum of the opera world, and part of your mission, I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, is to, you know, spread the gospel of opera, but it's a little different. I mean, you've written these great books like Verdi with a Vengeance and Wagner Without Fear, Puccini Without Excuses. I sort of sense a common theme there in your approach to talking about opera. I wonder if you could give us a little bit of an idea of what it is that you're about as a communicator.
I'm just starting to see it now, Brad, in these really strange times that we're living in, that I think if I were to come up with a word for my career, I'd call it arts activist. And by that, I mean, you look at what really annoys you and makes you mad, and that tells you a lot about who you are. And one of the things that I've bucked against my whole life, I can remember even as a kid, is this idea of the arts are this kind of cute little thing you do on the side after you've done all the real work in life, after you've done respectable work. Then maybe if you have some time over as a badge of your conspicuous leisure, you do with the arts, or you deal with the arts. And to me, this is phenomenally wrongheaded and leads to a lot of problems. Well, you remember we worked together, and we were the music division, and there was a news division. And sometimes we felt that there was the funniest look that you got from the news people in the hallway, that the music people were this thing over there on the side.
Yeah.
And that annoyed me tremendously, because to me, the arts, all the arts, are a time to process the information you get in the world. And we get a lot of information right now. What we need now more than ever is the time and place to process that and to ask the bigger questions, so that we're not always in a political stalemate, either on the national or the personal level of, well, why is it like this? And how come this always happens? Well, it's the arts we turn to ask the bigger questions and maybe get some answers and make some progress on that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I see the arts. And Brad, here's what's really funny. I find a lot of this, my background isn't in music, unlike yours. My background is in music as a consumer, but my background was literature and classics, actually, Latin and Greek and medieval. And I had a professor once say, if you study something else, you're studying a trade, which is great, which is important. But if you're studying the arts or literature, you're studying human thought. And I carry that over into music today. And oddly, and you may laugh at this, or some of your listeners might, I find some of the most profound questions, just essential questions about being human, to be looked at, if not answered, but explored at the opera.
Yeah.
Dumb old foofy opera that people insist on marginalizing. as something trivial and fluffy. And to me, this is phenomenal because in this medium of singing a story, I find unique insights. But, I'm not only about opera, as you know, but opera especially is a place for me to do that and to ask other people to do that too.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about opera because you made an announcement.
That was a long answer, wasn't it?
That's good. That's good, though.
Okay.
We see so many musicians out there putting their art online, and I think it speaks to the fact that, they're not only artists who create art because they make a living at it, but there are artists who create art for art's own sake, and we need it now more than ever during this time of COVID-19. So that's why you're seeing all these things popping up online. But I want to pivot a little bit. We're going to stay on the opera topic, but we need to talk about this fantastic webinar series that you have created. It's happening in June, 8 sessions over 2 different weeks, and you've divided it up into these different topics. And you've got guest singers. I mean, not just, your run-of-the-mill singer. You've got some pretty big names on this list of guests.
I've got a bullpen. I have a real deep bullpen here, yes.
Yeah. And you've also got the added component of cocktails that have been made for So there's a whole lot to dive into here, but the title of the whole thing is The Epic of Opera with William Berger. Talk a little bit about the series itself. Give us a little bit of an overview, and then I want to dive into a couple of the actual sessions themselves.
Yeah, great. The Epic of Opera is a survey of this unique and admittedly weird art form from the point of view of what is it, how did it get that way, why did it get that way, and what is to be found uniquely in it. What's the vein of gold that can only be found at the opera? And it ends up structurally being a historical survey. I know that's a bad word. Nobody turned that dial yet. Let me unpack that. Just because from the point of view of how it got that way, we do start with its invention at a specific moment in time and history, to today. So it has a chronological structure to it, but it is not a history in terms of this happened and that happened. It is looking at aspects of it. So we have 8 sessions broken up that way. It's interesting because I have these singers that I just basically called and never thought I would get singers of this caliber to join me. But one of the reasons they're all enthusiastic about it is because I'm not talking to singers as singers in that way, and I know you know what I mean. Like, so how did you get started? And what other repertory is coming up for you? And why don't you sing more Wagner? And all that, which is great and really important. But at the Met and at other radio stations, we have the opportunity to do that, and we have the mandate to do that with singers. Now I get to talk to them about, well, for instance, I have an episode on going from madness to magnificence, bel canto and grand opera. So the sort of mid-19th century chunk of historical experience there. And I get to talk to, for instance, Jamie Barton and Joseph Kalea about bel canto. That's the stuff with all the notes in it.
Yeah.
What's the point of it? How does that work for you? How is that not just about looky what I can do with my voice? What's the story you're telling here?
Yeah.
They don't get to talk about those things, say when I'm interviewing them at intermission at the Met. They have to talk about, well, I'm singing this role in this opera because. Here we get to talk about, what it does for me. And also, there are a lot of people who are joining us who are interested in human rights issues. And things that are in the news today. And so, in other words, so as an opera singer, instead of being this thing apart on the side, how do you see yourself as an activist, really? And what are your means of participating in what's going on now through opera? So that's really interesting. But let me just clarify real quickly. I'm not, it's not all an interview at all. The way we're doing it is I've got a presentation, about 20 minutes or so, with visuals, with pictures, recommended playlists, further reading suggestions, but we're not doing any listening in real time. I'll say, you'll see that in this, go check that out and have that there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll have a little conversation with a singer, but about these subjects.
Yeah.
What's the thing about Mozart? What's so profound about it? What's with all this crazy modern 20th century and 21st century opera, pots and pans banging? How do I deal with that? What's going on? And that.
Yeah. And do you have a little Q&A? I mean, is there any interactivity going on?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Audience participation time.
Yeah.
Curated question and answer. We have producers who will help me select questions to put and statements and comments to share with the featured guest artists.
Great.
Yeah.
I do want to mention that that episode on bel canto and grand opera has a companion cocktail, which is made by you. You're the bartender for that episode, and it's called the Rossini. Is it?
Yes, that's right.
Now, I seem to remember that you have a long-standing admiration for Rossini in particular. Is that true?
I mean, really? Yes, definitely. I adore Rossini. I mean, one of the reasons that, he's not in my crown of, well, I do have a Rossini t-shirt. Yeah, I adore Rossini. And one of the reasons I love Rossini is he's another one that you can take on a very superficial level and, Bugs Bunny sings to Rossini and all this.
Right.
Or you could take the whole journey and realize this guy was heavy.
Yeah.
And I love that sort of stealth heaviosity.
That's nice. You described this seminar in a few different ways, looking at the main page of the website. I need to mention the website, by the way. It's William Berger, Berger, presents.com. We'll link to that when we post this online.
Thank you. Yes, all one word.
But one of the things that you say here, you call it a crashing blow to previous preconceptions. I know you've talked about that a little bit, but what are some of those preconceptions or misconceptions about the wide world of opera?
That it is a luxury commodity of escapism, a badge of conspicuous leisure. It certainly can be all those things. I'm not in denial of the social history of this, but I think that's just part of this vast epic. Brad, a lot of people who write about opera are primarily literary people,
mm-hmm.
and therefore they are literally literal. Right?
Yeah.
I know that word is abused, and therefore it is difficult for many of the best minds who have written about it to see beyond the literal in opera. And you know as well as I do that opera does not work on the literal level.
Yeah.
That when we describe, and we've both done this, when you describe the synopsis of an opera, it sounds silly. So people will think that opera is silly, but no, it's the words about the opera. It's condensing it into a synopsis and making it words only that makes it silly. This was Anna Russell's great discovery with her explanation of Wagner's Ring of the Nibelung in 18 minutes, that all you had to do was tell the story in 18 minutes, and it was hilarious.
Yeah, I actually put that on the radio not too long ago.
And it's amazing. It's meta heavy. It's
Yeah.
the act of what she's doing is a profound analysis of Wagner. Okay, fine. But so that when you have writers like sometimes Tolstoy, when he wrote about going to the opera in War and Peace, it was very much a parody. There's this fat guy with bow legs that we're supposed to believe is a lover and all this, because Tolstoy, of course, is the master of the literal and absolutely could not see the other dimensions that were behind it. Not all, some writers can, but it's always difficult to explain it. George Bernard Shaw.
Yeah.
And so on. But so that we as English speakers in the English language tend to have a bias toward the word, because our great tradition is literary, English literature is supreme. And we think textually if we think in English in a way that other cultures don't. So that you can get a message in the music itself that is capped off by the words in a way that maybe we as English speakers won't see as easily because we'll go to the words first.
Right.
Anyway, there are all sorts of issues like this about, I would say, to answer your question, the biggest preconception is that it is not a profound art form. And I'm here to say, oh, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
You might have to take one step to the right or the left to see it that way. But it's there.
What about somebody that's coming to opera from the periphery? They listen to it on the radio. They like hearing the broadcast on the Met, but they don't really know much about it. What would you say to that person? Say it's somebody who is a complete novice.
Yeah, join us. Join us. Because this is I think I even say this somewhere in text on the website, but this is my one and only superpower. But it's a good one, which is we're talking to everyone here. Because if we're not going to be talking about this art form the same way that other people have, and very well, in other webinars and books and other things. In other words, we could talk about, there was Last of the Prima Donnas, which was that great book that talked about what was the style that they had in the golden age that made this stuff so compelling. And they talked about technique and repertory and all that, which is great. You might need to know a certain amount of something, but I'm talking about what is this medium?
Yeah.
So therefore, I'm talking to everyone from the greatest expert to person on the street. And that's something one tries to do. I talk about opera a lot to all different places, from elementary schools to the greatest conservatories to the rabid fans, and you know who I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
And the more I do, the more I realize that when I'm talking about opera itself, it's the same talk. I don't have to trim it to the sales or whatever the expression is for different people. I remember Robert Shaw, the great conductor who we remember especially for his choral work.
Right.
Apparently, I've heard, once told the choristers, I believe it was Beethoven 9 or performance of something that was done quite often, said every performer here needs to know that someone in the audience is hearing this for the first time and someone in the audience is hearing this for the last time. And somehow you have to put that in your singing. And when I heard that, I had one of these zoinks kind of moments, and it was like, that's what, in a way, I need to aim for if I want to talk about a subject this vast and this important.
Wow.
It's got to be for everybody off the street and jaded who needs a new way of looking at it.
Wow, that's fantastic. I'm looking at the list of singers here, and you have, as we mentioned, Jamie Barton, Joseph Kalea, but you've also got some other big names on here, and singers that are really both thought-provoking in their art, and people that I know have done a lot of thinking and talking about what it is that they do in opera in general. Do you want to pick one or two people here and sort of talk a little bit about what they have to offer you?
One of the people who will be joining us is LaTanya Moore, who I recently did a sort of panel, an online panel with, and we were talking about Aida, Verdi's Aida, and Leontyne Price, the great interpreter of this role, and so on and so forth. And what we ended up talking about was the issues of who Verdi's people are and who they are in us. And it got so exciting, and we were blabbing. You had to see us. We were like, it was happy hour, and we were those two at the bar that everyone could hear. We were like, yeah, and another thing, and furthermore, and you're right about that, and so, and we didn't plan to. It just happened because people talk about Verdi specifically as a political artist, as a political composer,
right,
someone who wrote political operas, but I think, and LaTanya and I were talking about that people tend to talk about that in a very narrow way, that it wasn't about, yay, we should unify the Italian nation and wave the red, white, and green flag. There was that at one point, but that was almost 200 years ago, and really nobody cares right now in that way. We wouldn't be listening to it because of that only, that the politics were much deeper. The politics were about who people are.
Yeah.
And it's there, and it's there in the music. It's not just there in the libretto. It's there in the music, how the music works, how the voice works, what the human voice is. That the human voice is spirit, literally. Like spirit means breath, and the human voice is a creative and procreative organ. And all this great stuff came tumbling out, and it was every bit about everything we're seeing in headlines today, everything people are talking about, death, civil rights. It was all right there in Verdi. And that's how there's no reason not to talk about this. So that was one thing. We have, to start us all off, I have one of the great singers of opera history, delighted that he's joining us, Justino Diaz.
Yeah.
Certainly someone who has not only been a great fixture of the operatic firmament, but who has sort of been there like Zelig. Remember that? There's
right.
Another reference. But at great moments, so many great moments of opera history, he was there. So since that's our first episode, although I've got to tell you, I keep in touch with Justino, and this is not a person who lives in the past at all. He's right now, but he has a perspective that's amazing. So again, we're talking about what is this opera thing in the world, in real life, not just as an abstraction over there. So I've got him. And then to end it, our final session, I have Susanna Phillips, who, because she has made a career on singing everything from Baroque and pre-Baroque to brand spanking new operas written with her in mind in some cases, and songs, the whole issue of, all right, so what do we do with this tradition from then here today, the way people hear music and experience life today? And she'll be joining us for our last session, which I hope will be a springboard to more thought, to future opera, and maybe to more of these in the summer.
Yeah.
I'm thinking. Yeah.
Fantastic. Do you plan to archive these for folks that are registered and have paid for the series? Okay.
Yes, they will be all available on some form of recording, video recording, that I will let people know about, to everyone who subscribes, and available for purchase to everyone else.
Great. The website is William Berger. That's William with 2 L's, and then Berger, presents.com, all one word. You can find all the information there, including some of these cocktails, which are each of them are themed to what you're talking about, or to the singer that you have as a guest. You did the Rossini. Some other great cocktails on here. And you know, folks obviously are going to be watching this, many of them from home, I assume. So, you know, fire up the cocktail, get your snacks, sit back and relax and enjoy.
Yes. A note on that. The bartenders who contributed are all temporarily unemployed music people and bartenders who are participating in part of this, many of whom have come to the opera, are opera fans of various levels, and many of whom are from other realms of opera, but part of the New York art scene. They've been contributing to this too. So check them out. We'll have videos from them, and if you need to hire them for a party, they're scattered all around the country, if that ever becomes a thing again.
Fantastic. Well, you should put some kind of a link on there where we can tip them for the cocktails.
We are looking into that today, a tip jar. Yes, very much so.
Yeah, totally. Well, there are 8 different sessions over 2 weeks. It's happening in June. The first one is June 7th. William Berger presenting his webinar series. And again, it's at williambergerpresents.com. The Epic of Opera. That's the title of it, with William Berger. Well, Will, I can't wait to see all the different things that are involved in this, and I hope that folks will take advantage of it, because, you know, we've been talking about it for almost half an hour now, and I think that I feel like we've barely scratched the surface of all these different subjects and all these different things that are wrapped up in the world of opera. So it's just a fascinating deep dive into something that I think a lot of folks will find value in. Will, I know you have other things to get off to today in New York. How are things in New York right now, by the way?
It's very strange in New York. It just the last few days, it seems a little bit more like New York, and we've seen an uptick in vehicular traffic. People I have a small, beautiful little neighborhood park around the corner from me, and people are there wearing masks, the kids, people walking dogs, all the people wearing face coverings, which is very gratifying to see. That it's like they're looking out for each other. So, you know, New York is always the best and the worst place to be anyway. And it's very much been like that. But what really stands out is you see people, as if you remember after September 11th, you see people looking out for each other within what they can do at this point. But it's definitely been strange, Brad.
Yeah.
Very strange. Yeah.
Well, we wish you continued health and safety with everything going on. And also, best of luck with the webinar series. I know it'll be a big hit. I hope a lot of our listeners take advantage of that. Again, we'll link to everything you need to know on our website at wgte.org. William Berger, thank you so much for spending some time and telling us about all these wonderful things that are going on.
Thanks, Brad Cresswell. Always great to speak to you anyway, but especially about this. Thanks, Brad.